Okay, so we have Chapter 1 of FE4 here. Speeding through the intro. Alternate is coming to say hello. And then run any forces pilot. So, I'll start off here by just scrolling through the unit list and showing you the stats and levels of my men. I know I did that at the end of the last time, but I do it again. And then I proceed to plow through as much of the arena as I can at the very beginning of this chapter here. The arena is actually vital for ranking FE4, and that's where a lot of your units will get the bulk of the XP that they need to satisfy the XP rank. The arena is actually fairly difficult at points, so you'll notice that I'll be switching back and forth between characters to get a different set of random numbers so that they can, be successful in their endeavors here. There's not a whole lot that will necessarily bear mentioning on these arena battles, so it may just be in your best interest to skip past them. I include them merely for the sake of completeness, but they're by no means fascinating. I mean, there's occasional things here, like, you'll notice that Osmo has grown just enough magic to two-shot that guy. If he hadn't, he would have been forced to end his run at Sharky there. There are a couple other things, like Arden also grows exactly the right strength to two-shot one of the enemies using a specific weapon. The Slim Sword, which is more accurate than the Steel Sword, which is why I had him use it. But, I mean, that's still to come. And here we're just watching a parade of low random number, or high random numbers, and low hit rates. I also do a whole lot of item swapping around in order to make the required wins happen. So there, Ethlyn needed the extra might from the Steel Sword on her crit, as well as just in general to get past that night. Very soon, I'll be sending Quan's Silver Lance over to Finn, because Finn needs the extra muscle and Quan doesn't, because Quan's a monster. But that doesn't happen for a little while here yet. Also, in addition to just trying to pass the arena, for certain characters who don't have a lot of trouble with their fights, if they're close to leveling, I will also try to make sure that they get at least some decent stats on their level and not, like, plus luck. Which is the reason why, for instance, I held off on Lex for a while, because he would have no problems facing that guy, but his previous level was kind of shitty, so I just kept it. Every once in a while I'd check to see if getting a good level yet. And so, even though this is still like barely half the cast of characters, it took a good 40 minutes to run through like the entire arena. And so I've sped it up to 4 times here, so skipping ahead to the 10-minute mark is perhaps advisable. I know I mentioned it before, but if you're still here, I'm going to mention it again and again, because it's not the most exciting thing to watch. Although there will be a few highlights. Seeing certain people perform better than you might expect is kind of entertaining once in a while. So, Ethlyn's critical skill really helps her out in this chapter 1 arena before she had a chance to grow into some of her good stats. And often, proper ordering and having the critical skill is basically an I win button for most fights. And here, it takes 2 criticals to take down this knight, and countless regular hits. So that's actually as far as Ethan gets in this arena. I tried her against the general here, but she just couldn't pull it off, being too weak. I could have theoretically handed her Sigurd's Silver Sword and seen if that would have helped, but I didn't actually consider trying that. Mostly because I figured it would be too expensive to buy and sell and buy and sell. Although, that probably was foolish. In the end, it turns out that Ethan really doesn't need the help, because with proper staff use, she'll get way on up in levels, and I was needlessly concerned here. I guess one thing to mention is, although Noish and Alec are the traditional red and green knights, for some reason I have the hardest time associating Noish with red. I keep thinking he's the yellow knight, and it's probably because I don't have battle animations turned on most of the time, so all I see is his portrait, in which his hair color is bright yellow, and I barely notice his red armor. It's a lot more noticeable when he's actually fighting. Random tidbit, because you're still watching this, even though, it wasn't relevant to anything that was going on. There's not always a lot really relevant to talk about during the video, so I figured, hey, why not? So, you may notice that when I can, I try to use cheaper weapons, mostly because I'm a miser, and if I can get away with not spending money, especially in the arena, I will. So this is the guy that aren't exactly 2 shots, thanks to the levels he grew, and that's convenient and useful. Arden also never managed to successfully make his way through that general. I suppose if I kept trying, maybe it could have happened, but at some point I just gave up and I didn't even put him into the rotation anymore. And so we're coming slowly up near the end here. For the most part, it's down to just Sigurd and Noish back and forth here for a little bit more. Alright, Lex. I've kind of forgotten about Lex for a while. I think I was holding off for a good level, and then I just was like, wait, you still need to go, don't you? Alright, so Sigurd clears. And I actually didn't need to sacrifice Lex there. I do it for 2 reasons. One is that it helps Alec grow a plus strength level. I mean, Alec could have beaten this axe armor any day of the week, but he kept growing, terrible levels instead of, stats that I actually wanted. Also, I wanted somebody injured so that Ethlyn could get in some heal action on turn 1. So Lex was the perfect candidate for that. Here I pull up the little window and show what the final levels are and who reached what level in the arena. just for your satisfaction, in case you skipped here, which I had sort of advised. But then we start in the actual turn proper. So chapter 1 is the first real chapter. The prologue was just an appetizer. So chapter 1 involves a lot more walking and takes a lot more time. There are 3 main castles to seize: Genoa, Marfa, and Giovanni. In addition to that, there are several other objectives that you need to do. You need to recruit 2 enemy units to your side. You also want to have Lex get the Hero Axe, which involves him trekking to an out-of-the-way peninsula. In addition to that, there's always the typical, you want to make sure that you get as much gold from villages as you can, and also you want to make sure that you have all the special event conversations that you can. I didn't explicitly mention it, but you just saw Quan talked to Finn and gave him some free stats. Those happen every once in a while. And you just have to know who talks to who, when, and whether it's worth having a conversation or not. So we just got Du and ID, who are a cleric and a thief. It's kind of an archetype that travels along with Fire Emblem. They start out way removed from the rest of my army, so they'll have to fend for themselves for a while. But they're capable of that. Here, I just keep sending my units, straight into the fray, moving as far as possible, trying for, the efficient clear of getting to Genoa as soon as possible. I want to save as many turns here in the early chapters before I have all of my units, so that I can spend more time in the later chapters when I actually have every unit I want, so I can either spend some more time placing them adjacent to grow their love points, or just so that they all have a shot at the experience. And so I make sort of a defensive formation there. My foot units, of course, fall behind everybody else. Finn is actually perhaps overexposed here. He gets a lot more NFA's action than I was anticipating he would. He doesn't in any actual danger of death, but he gets a lot of experience here and takes a lot more damage than I was really hoping for. But you make do with, how things pan out, and you just proceed. Okay, so thieves in Fire Emblem 4 work a little differently than other thieves. There aren't a lot of chests or doors to pick. They just steal money from enemy units, which is good. It's one of your main sources of non-village, non-arena revenue. So again, I clear a path, and I head on south with Quan there. So then I use Mitter to weaken up Kinboy, and he activates Charge and actually gets in an awful lot of hits. If he'd killed him, I would have been disappointed, because I want Lex to get the kill, because Kinboy has a droppable hand axe. Lex, being the only person that can use axes, is the natural choice to receive the axe, because it gives him some flexibility to his offense. 1 to 2 range is not as great in this game, because this game is a lot more player-face centric than most of the other Fire Emblems. At least, in my opinion, it is. People may beg to differ, but I think the record will speak for itself. In that it's not the kind of Fire Emblem where you just toss one guy with like a hand axe or a javelin into a mob and let them all suicide on him. You need to coordinate as a team. Occasionally there will be huge mobs of enemy phase action, but for the most part, it's player phase dominated. So, I may have sent Ethlyn too far to the west. It'll become more apparent on the following turn. But I was afraid of her aggroing a lot of these enemies that I was hoping would attack Arden and Ozzel. And so maybe putting her over by the village was a good idea. I didn't actually check to see what would have happened otherwise. But that was a fairly effective player phase. I mean, we whittled down that huge army from many to just the 3.